Well, good morning, sons, and who else might be catching this video this morning or tomorrow or down the calendar line sometime. We're to number 100 in our Jesus is Better series, and we're to the second conclusion phase of this series, so we're getting close to the end. And this part of the series is called Christ, the Last and Forever Covenant. There's no other covenants. We're in the last covenant. It's the covenant of Jesus Christ. Now, I have to be careful this morning and not let pride set in. Number 100, that's pretty good. That's 100 10-minute videos through Hebrews and related passages. And I remember a couple instances in the Bible, famous people that we've heard of. Moses got in trouble when he told Moses to strike the rock one time for water to come out of the rock to show God's power. The Israelites were thirsty, and Moses took his staff and struck the rock, and water came out. And God got the glory, except this is what happened. Moses struck the rock, but he wasn't patient to wait, and he struck it a second time. You know what happened to Moses? He died before he got to the promised land. His penalty for pride was he died before he got to the promised land. God hates pride. How is pride striking a second time? Well, the second time it looked like Moses got the glory. He hit it once, it didn't work, so he struck it again. It looked like the power came from Moses. And we're going to get into this. I don't know if we'll get into it today, but it's a good thing to mention. The greatest sin is to have a God before Christ, because that means you're not aligned to Christ, and that means that you're not going to get to the promised land. We learned this from Moses. Pride, self-assurance instead of Christ assurance, you're not going to make it to the promised land. And then another time, and the reason why I bring this up, 100, that's a pretty good number, right? Pride could send in, I could say, wow, look, 100 videos. I hope that's not the case. Another famous person from the Bible, King David, who wrote all Psalms. The whole book of Psalms he wrote. Not every psalm, but most of the Psalms. And King David built a great army. So he decided to count to see how many people was in his army. And his closest advisor knew this was not going to be right with God. And he tried to tell David, no, don't do that. So King David went ahead and had the armies counted, the numbers. And God, in his spirit, told David, you have three choices to pay for this penalty. One, you can die. Two, and I don't exactly remember, but I think he'd have to leave his throne. Or the third, hundreds of thousands of people would get a disease under your leadership and will die. You know, King David chose that. He didn't want to die, but he let hundreds of thousands of people die. This is the same man that God said, David's a man after my own heart. And think about David's life. And I know, wow, I'm in a story now. I don't know how far we're going to get today, but this is a really important lesson for us. How could God say, David, you're a man after my own heart? If you read about David, you understand that not only did he count his army, and not only did he allow the penalty to be for his sin, was to have hundreds of thousands of his own people die. And he was a murderer. He had an affair with Bathsheba, so he's an adulterer. And then she was pregnant, and to hide that pregnancy, her husband, he put him on the front line in a battle so he would be killed. So David's a liar, a murderer, an adulterer. He's a boastful person, counting the army. How could God possibly say he's a man after my own heart? All this should be such encouragement to you and me today. You know why? Because whenever David was confronted with his sin, he didn't run from it, he owned up to it. And he said, I'm sorry. I don't want to do that again. See, that's what God values. As I said before, the first covenant of the Ten Commandments, God knew we couldn't keep them. How are you going to keep the greatest of all? How are we going to love God with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength? You know, as I make calls sometimes to encourage people, there's always one more call I could make. As I read the Bible, there's always one more passage I could read. As I pray, there's always one more person I could pray for. We can't do enough. We can't do it. That's why God gave us the second covenant of His Son. That we're gonna, in these next couple of videos, we're gonna learn more about the second covenant and how the first covenant did not work. Aren't you glad God didn't say that's it? They didn't keep the first covenant. That's it. But He made a second covenant. And here's the good news this morning. God already had planned the second covenant before the first covenant failed, because He knows everything. But the second covenant, that's it. This is Jesus Christ. The second covenant is following a person, trusting a person, believing in a person. See, there's a difference between believe and trust. Picture a guy over the Niagara Falls on a tightrope, and he takes a wheelbarrow across that tightrope to the other side. So he gets to the other side, and they interview a person watching this take place, and they ask the person, do you think he's going to make it back to the other side? And he says, I sure do. He says, will you get in that wheelbarrow as he goes across? And that guy said, oh, no. He believed he'd do it, but he didn't trust. See, that's salvation. It's not believing what Jesus Christ did for us. It's trusting it. It's trusting it for your eternity. It's understanding that you have no hope outside of Jesus Christ. And you trust that. You value that. You cherish that. And you know what it does? It changes your life. Because you not only are you thankful, not only are you counting on it, but you're looking forward to it. See, I have a hope for a better day. And that's what I pray for everybody that's on my prayer list. I have 7 days of prayer with different people at different days. But my sons are on my list every day. My good best friends on my list every day. My grandchildren, daughter-in-laws on my list every day. Thanking God for my salvation is on my list every day. It changes our heart. But you know what else I pray for? That you would have a hope for a better day coming. And I don't mean a better earthly day, because these days are getting worse and worse. Listen, America has fallen into darkness. We are being judged by God. God is allowing leaders to be in place to promote wicked things. Why? Because we're being judged for killing babies, for all our adulteries, for all our lies as a country. And the biggest one of all, putting idols, putting finances before God, putting success before God, putting pleasure before God. I don't have time to go to church, many people say, but you'll find them have time on a Sunday morning to get to a football game. Oh, I don't have time on Saturdays to go knocking on doors, but they have time to be on a golf course. Oh, I don't have, my weekends are busy. I don't have time for church, but they go away camping over the weekend. See, pleasure, finances, it's all about self. See, when you trust yourself, you're going to fall short in salvation. Second, Jesus is better, 100. Jesus is my Savior. That's who I'm counting on. That's my only hope. That's my desire. That's what changed me one day when I didn't know I needed Christ. I knew what He did. I knew He rose from the grave, but I never took it personally. I believed it, but I didn't trust it for my salvation, for my debt of sin would be paid if I could trust that, and I do. Oh, I pray today that you'd put your trust in the work of Christ.